Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson served as President of Iceland for 20 years, 5 terms. He left office in the summer of 2016. He was first elected in 1996, having led the People's Alliance Party from 1987 to 1995. His first 12 years in office were rather conventional. However, after the collapse of the Icelandic banks in 2008, he was heavily criticized for his support of Icelandic business Vikings, investments abroad, and activities of the Icelandic banks. His last 8 years have been dynamic. One is his role in bringing the Arctic to the public debate. The International Conference of the Arctic Circle Assembly in Reykjavik has become a major international event. The other is the Icesave controversy. The former president vetoed an agreement which the Icelandic government had done with the UK and the Netherlands in 2010. Mr. Grímsson's position among world leaders is special as to trusting the people. Together, the Arctic Circle and Icesave leave Mr. Grímsson with the democratic legacy of power to the people. These two issues are big in Iceland. For the first time, Iceland has become a venue for a major international conference held annually in Reykjavik, with world leaders attending along with the public. Mr. Grímsson announced the Arctic Circle Assembly in the National Press Club in Washington in April 2013, a conference bringing politics to the table with the grassroots, so to speak, science, business, NGOs, and the people of the Arctic.
What we have done is to establish in a very short time the largest annual international gathering on the Arctic, where representatives of governments, science, think tanks, environmental organizations, businesses, corporations, indigenous communities, or simply interested individuals and other citizens' organizations can come together in an open and democratic dialogue on the future of the Arctic. It is sometimes forgotten that the Arctic is a big part of our planet. It's approximately the size of Africa when you add it all up. And for centuries it was completely unknown to the so-called enlightened part of the world, distant home of the indigenous people. And in the second half of the 20th century, it became one of the most militarized areas in the world. So it wasn't really until the end of the 20th century, and the beginning of the 21st century, that this big part of the planet became open to international cooperation. So we are facing for the first time in human history the challenge of how we organize the framework and the decisions on the future of the Arctic. And this part of the planet is also of critical importance for the climate future of planet Earth. So my idea and my partners was that we needed a prominent enough and a big enough platform so the major leaders of the world, whether they were presidents or prime ministers or leading scientists or leading business executives or leading environmentalists, found it both interesting and proper to come to this gathering and participate in a new type of an open democratic dialogue. But I think the key to the success of the assembly is that it is open and democratic, which means that concerned citizens or young students or anybody who is interested can enter the assembly and ask questions and become a part of the discussion. And that is very rare for international conferences of this kind and this scale, that citizens, ordinary people, can come and participate in this way. But I think that is true to the Icelandic tradition, the open democratic tradition we have in this country, where everybody can speak to the president and everybody can take part in the political dialogue, that we have transformed this Icelandic tradition over to this international assembly.
20 years ago, the Arctic Council of 8 countries was established. The US, Russia, Canada, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark on behalf of Greenland. It's an intergovernmental body where governmental officials come together to discuss the issues of the Arctic with the public and faraway countries not having a seat at the table. Some say that the Arctic Circle is a challenge to the Arctic Council.
No, I think that is a misunderstanding. We see the Arctic Circle and the Assembly and the forums as an assistance to the governmental work of the Arctic Council. The Arctic Council is a formal diplomatic governmental organization where only those who are formal representatives have a voice and a seat at the table. And that is as it is in international organizations of this kind. But we thought that the future of the Arctic required a meeting hall where everybody could sing, where everybody could participate in the orchestra and the choir, and every voice could be heard. And then those who sit at the formal Arctic Council table can be influenced by the dialogue. And this has been the case, that representatives of the Arctic states, who are formally the leaders of the Arctic Council, have found in the Arctic Circle Assembly and the forums an additional tool in order to make the work successful. In this way, for example, under the American chairmanship of the Arctic Council, the leading representatives from the American administration, like Admiral Plapp and Mark Brzezinski, have used the assembly of the Arctic Circle to present the case of President Obama and Secretary Kerry and the American government to this wider audience. And the reason why we have invited the Foreign Minister of Finland to speak at the opening session this year is that next year Finland will take over the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. And Finland can similarly, in the next 2 years, use the Arctic Circle assemblies to broaden their message and explain the emphasis of the chairmanship to this wider democratic audience. So I think both of them go together in an interesting way. And I personally believe that in the 21st century, we are in a world where the old diplomatic methods of simply governmental representatives sitting around the table no longer work. We need to broaden the participation in a much more effective way and invite anybody who has anything to say and anything meaningful to say to actually play a role. And if we do that, then we will have more success. And I believe, for example, that one of the reasons why the Paris Climate Conference was so successful in the end was it invited representatives from non-governmental organizations, from science, from business and others, to get involved in a more productive way than had been the case sort of previously.
In the aftermath of the collapse of the Icelandic banks in October 2008, Mr. Grímsson criticized European countries, not least the Scandinavian countries, for lack of support to Iceland during the crisis. And when the Icelandic government reached an agreement with Britain and the Netherlands for bailouts of the fallen Icelandic banks, he twice vetoed, and on both occasions the nation refused to be held responsible for private banks' activities. That in itself was a unique decision taken by the President of Iceland, letting the people decide, defying the international financial system, Brussels, and Wall Street. The two referendums were held on January 2010 and April 2011. With the decision to veto Icesave, Mr. Grímsson went against his former left-wing allies. Britain and the Netherlands, along with the European Union, took Iceland to the EFTA court. The court cleared Iceland of all charges, thus the democratic will of the Icelandic people had triumphed. Can it be said, Mr. Grímsson, that you've truly changed the office by, for example, launching this Arctic Circle Assembly, which is totally new, but not least to the controversial issue of Icesave?
Well, it has been my position not to issue judgment on my own time as president. On one hand, I conducted the presidency in a traditional way, but on the other, I did things which had not been done before. I exercised the power of the president to refer controversial issues to the people of Iceland. Many criticized me when I did that, but I fundamentally believe that the democratic will of the people should be the decisive voice. And I think now, when people look back on it, they realize it was the right decision, that the people of Iceland could be trusted in this way. And I think our democracy will never be the same after the nation has experienced that. Because before the so-called leadership or the decision-making elite of the country could claim that they alone could be trusted to make the right decision. Whereas Icesave showed that the government of the time, plus many members of the so-called decision-making elite, took a wrong position. And the people of Iceland took the right position. And then, in addition, as you mentioned, the Arctic Circle and some other things I did internationally, both with respect to clean energy and the climate, the Northern Research Forum, and my involvement in both the Clinton Global Initiative and the World Economic Forum and many other international platforms, was a new path for the presidency, to participate actively in an international dialogue and cooperation of that kind, and then create new instruments for that. Because before, the presidents had made state visits to other countries, maybe given some lectures or speeches, but they had not been active players in this wide-ranging international cooperation. And one of the interesting things about the Arctic Circle is that it demonstrates that the president can create new instruments for constructive international cooperation in a successful way. And it benefits the country, it benefits the international community, but it also gives the young people of Iceland an opportunity which they didn't have before, to annually participate in an international cooperation and learn firsthand what cooperation among people from all over the world actually means. So I hope all of this will show people that although the presidency has formal duties, it can also be used in a constructive, dynamic way to further international cooperation on important issues and thereby give Iceland a stronger voice among nations.
Could it be said that through these two issues we are discussing that Iceland has a stronger international voice?
No, absolutely. I think that is the objective conclusion. The reputation Iceland gained from holding the referendums and trusting the people with these important decisions in the financial crisis was unique. because in most countries it was argued that democracy should not be allowed to interfere with the financial markets. Everybody knows how the people of Greece were not allowed to vote on these issues. And in the Arctic Circle also, the reputation of Iceland as a meeting place for representatives of these important nations, United States, Russia, Canada, China, Germany, France, Britain, Japan, and so on, is an important recognition that Iceland can serve a special role in the international community. And for example, last year at the Assembly, it was an interesting proof of this, that Mark Brzezinski, who is the highest official in the White House on the Arctic, expressed in an open session of the Arctic Circle Assembly how the cooperation between the United States and Russia in the Arctic had been constructive and positive despite the disagreements about Ukraine and other international issues, and how important it was that Russia and the United States could continue that constructive dialogue. And without the Arctic Circle Assembly, the evidence of such constructive cooperation between Russia and the United States would not be as clear as it was made by him in front of this vast audience.